Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at a new gaming laptop from Lenovo. This is their Legion Y730, and this is the 15-inch version of it. A very nice and compact gaming laptop. It's got a 1050 Ti built in, and it has a Hexacore CPU, a 6-core CPU in this one. We're going to be taking a closer look at what this device can do in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this came in on loan from Lenovo. So when we're done with this, it goes back to them. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor has anyone approved or reviewed what you're about to see before I uploaded it. So let's get to it now and see what this laptop is all about. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. These start at $1,200 and kind of work their way up from there. All of the models, at least at the moment, have the 1050 Ti GPU built in with no other GPU options. So this does not have the new generation of NVIDIA GPUs that just came out. So as a result, the performance on graphics here will be the same we've seen with this same GPU over the last year or two on some of the other laptops we've looked at. But it does have some nice hardware attributes here that are new, and we'll be exploring some of those in a few minutes. It's got a 15.6-inch display. This is a 60 Hz display, and it looks like some international configurations might have a 144 Hz display that supports G-Sync. This one is just a standard 1080p 60 display. It is nice and bright. They say it's around 300 nits, and I would say that's probably about right. It looks pretty bright to me under normal room lights, and overall the display is decent. However, I did notice a little bit of vertical banding when I have solid colors up on the screen. I'm going to put a photo up right now so you can see what that looks like. It's a little exaggerated on the photo just given how the camera works, but I am seeing these vertical lines on solid colors on screen, and I was not able to adjust that away, so just keep that in mind as you're looking at things. And I'm very pleased with the overall build quality here. This is an all-metal design for the most part. I think the bezel here on the inside of the display is plastic, but the rest here is metal. And I also like the fact that when you're moving the display around, the bottom portion of the laptop doesn't come with it. It's really sure-footed, as you can see here. So really nice overall build quality, feels very solid and well constructed, fairly attractive and relatively compact given it is a 15-inch gaming laptop. So overall, they did a nice job putting this device together. And the weight overall is 4.8 pounds or 2.2 kilograms, so not all that heavy. But the thin bezel design here did come at a cost because they had to move the webcam down to the lower bezel. It's a 720p webcam, not all that great, and you'll get these up-the-nose shots as a result of its location on the display there. So that's probably the only real issue that I saw here with its design choices. I'm very pleased with the keyboard. I'm usually pretty fond of these Lenovo keyboards as it is. This one's a little nicer because, as you can see, it's got some lighting on there courtesy of Corsair. So we'll take a look at that Corsair configuration utility a little later in the video to see how you can configure this. But you have a lot of options for how these keys are lit. You could have individual key lighting or do some schemes like I've got here with the colors pulsating through. And you also have lights on the side. So you've got both vents here with some additional lighting, and you can also light up the back too. These lights can be turned off if you think that's too obnoxious in the workplace or something, but you can very easily turn them back on with some key controls here. There's also some macro keys here on the front that I'll show you in a few minutes too. So there's some things that gamers might like here from a macro standpoint, which was nice to see. The trackpad's also very nice. It's not a click pad. You've got two buttons down here, so that was good. And overall, a very comfortable and nice input device strategy here on this one. Now for ports, we've got a few. There is a Thunderbolt port here on the side. This, of course, will work with USB-C devices, but also Thunderbolt devices. We were able to check, and it is a 4-lane Thunderbolt port, so if you wanted to hook up an external GPU, for example, you could do that on here and have the maximum Thunderbolt 3 bandwidth available to you. My only fault with the Thunderbolt port is that it doesn't accept power delivery. So if you had a docking station, for example, that can supply power, it will not charge through the port, but you do get video out and then your data devices going back and forth as well. And I would imagine it doesn't do power delivery just because these laptops do take a good amount of power. In fact, this one requires 135 watts on its power adapter, so that is probably why they didn't include the power delivery feature on here. The dock with the largest amount of power delivery I have tested caps out at 100 watts, so that's probably why they didn't enable that power delivery there. Now, most of the ports on this laptop are on the back. We had that Thunderbolt port on the side along with a headphone jack. On the back, we've got a Kensington lock slot for locking it down on a desk, great for college students. Right here is where the power adapter goes. And then you've got a USB 3.0 port, but this is a Gen 2 port, so it can support up to 10 gigabits per second. And you have another one of those 10 gigabit per second USB ports right here too. These will work with any USB device, but if you have one of those newer, faster devices, like an SSD or something, those will work at their full potential on those two ports. Right here is gigabit Ethernet, and then you've got HDMI and DisplayPort out, so you could probably drive two 4K displays on this one if you want at 60 hertz, and then you have the option to try to get a few more displays going out via the Thunderbolt. I would imagine, though, if you are looking to get as many displays as possible, you're probably going to be limited to 1080p when you go beyond just like the two 4K displays, for example, but there are lots of display output options on here. On the other side, if we move around here again, there's another USB port. This is just a regular USB 3.0 port running at 5 gigabits per second. But it does have a full complement of ports here, which is great to have on a gaming laptop. And I think you should not have an issue connecting the things that you wish to connect up to it. Now, for upgrades, you can upgrade the RAM and the storage on this, but you cannot upgrade the CPU or GPU. It's relatively easy to get into. All you have to do is unscrew all the screws you see here on the bottom and then pop the bottom lid off. It wasn't too hard to get into it. It was very easy to put it back together again. We took it apart on the extras channel so you can see exactly what's inside. But basically what you can do is put in a 2.5-inch SSD or spinning hard drive into the SATA portion of the case. You also have the option to put in a M2 drive. It can be an M2 SATA drive or an M2 NVMe drive. There's a single slot for that. And there's also 2 RAM slots on board. This one came with 16 gigs of RAM, but it was in single channel configuration. But you can put up to 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM inside. And if you occupy both of those slots, you'll get slightly better performance putting the computer into dual channel mode with those 2 RAM sticks installed. So overall, very easy to get into and pretty easy to upgrade as well. So let's take a look at some games now. We'll begin with Fortnite. Now with Fortnite and all of the other games you're about to see, we ran them at 1080p at their lowest settings just to get a maximum frame rate count that we could. So Fortnite was running at around 90 to 110 frames per second at the lowest settings. You could easily get it going at 60 for a good balance of visuals and performance. We also ran The Witcher 3, and we were getting between 60 and 75 frames per second. Again, lowest settings at 1080p on there. We also booted up GTA 5, and we were seeing anywhere from 120 to 150 frames per second, again running at 1080p at the absolute lowest settings. And overall, the performance we saw out of this device is very similar to what we've seen out of other 1050 Ti devices. And we also ran a benchmark just to make sure we were actually getting that same performance. So we booted up the 3D Mark Time Spy test, which is a DirectX 12 test. And there we got a score of 2,603. And if you look at these 2 other 1050 Ti devices we're comparing it against here, including the Y730 we looked at a few weeks ago, the frame rate on the graphics test is just about the same because it is the same GPU. But we are getting significantly faster CPU performance on the physics portion of that test due to the fact that we've got a 6-core i7 in this thing, which does give us better performance there. So if you have a game that's more CPU intensive, you might see a little bit of a performance boost on the 6-core version of the laptop here, but generally because of the GPU inside, it won't be light years faster perhaps than a quad-core computer equipped with that same graphics processor. But overall, you can see games like Rocket League here that are running at full settings are easily above 60 frames per second here and look quite nice as well. So not bad, but I wish there were maybe some options for some more powerful GPUs inside. Now the fans on the computer are not as noisy as some other gaming laptops I've looked at, but they will of course make some noise because it is blowing out a pretty decent quantity of air here out the back and side. The air intake is on the bottom here, so you want to keep this area clear. And generally, under normal usage, you're not going to hear the fans all that much. With Rocket League going, I can hear them running right now. It's not as loud as my Alienware 15-inch laptop is with the 1070 built in, but you will hear these fans, and they will get noisier the more load you're putting on the computer. So be prepared for some fan noise here. It wasn't as bad as some other gaming laptops I've looked at, but it is probably worse than what you might see with an Ultrabook or something that has less fans and smaller fans keeping it cool. But we did run the 3D Mark stress test, which runs basically a real graphically intensive benchmark over and over again to see how well the computer will do under load over time. And we got a passing grade on that test. This one came in at 99.2%. A passing grade is 97%. So even though the fans will be making some noise, they are doing their job to keep the computer cool. And my recommendation to get that same result when you're using it is to keep all the air inputs along the bottom clear and the air outputs on the back and side clear as well. They seem to be doing their job, and as long as you keep everything clean and open, you should have very good experience with this computer even when you are stressing it. There are speakers on here too, which I didn't mention. They're on the bottom. It's got stereo speakers here. They don't sound all that great. They're very loud, but there's not a real wide range of sounds. So one thing to probably get if you're looking for a broader range of sound with a little more punch to it is to hook up some headphones or something. But generally for laptop speakers, they are very clear and very loud. They just don't have a very wide range of sound. Now, battery life on most gaming laptops is short, especially if you are playing games. Typically, you're looking at about 2 hours, give or take, when you are putting the computer and its GPU under load. Running the CPU and GPU at their best performance will, of course, require a lot of power, which is why these things really are not sold as high-performing battery life devices. We are seeing in our testing doing some basic stuff like web browsing and word processing and that sort of thing is battery life that comes in around 6 hours or so. You might be able to squeeze an additional hour out of it by turning display brightness down and making sure your applications aren't triggering the GPU, for example. But generally, I think don't expect this to be something you're going to take on a long trip and have oodles of battery life. That's what the Ultrabooks are for. But nonetheless, it's no worse than other gaming laptops that we've looked at. Now, as I mentioned, they partnered up with Corsair for the keyboard lighting. They also, by the way, partnered with Corsair on one of the RAM configurations. You can buy this with overclocked RAM if you want from Corsair as part of the standard configuration. What we'll do here is just load up the app that configures your keyboard lighting. And I found this to be a little overly complex. Now, you've got a lot of options for how your keyboard looks, but just to set a color takes a little bit of work in figuring things out. So you can see here the lighting effects on the left-hand side of the screen. There are two things in my lighting effects right now. I've got rainbow wave, and then I've got this static color. And these work like layers. If you ever used Photoshop before, static color here will take precedence over rainbow wave. So as a result, my W, A, S, and D keys here are just blue and not changing colors with the rest of the keyboard as it's running its effects. So that's pretty cool, but if I wanted to have another color on the keyboard, I have to go ahead and create another layer here. So let me just go ahead and click on that and add that into the mix. So I think you're going to be spending a lot of time getting your keyboard color just right here. So we can maybe make another static color, and maybe I'll want this to be green, and maybe this end of the keyboard here we want to have green, or if I want to just select a specific key, I can hold down Control and select those keys. And now we've got those keys set to green, the other one set to blue, and if I turn the rainbow wave back on, you can see those colors are staying static as the rest of the keyboard is changing color. You can also go in here and click on the other parts of the computer here to change some of the lighting. I guess there is a light here by the Thunderbolt port too, so you can change how that looks. So we can turn on the color wave again so you can see what it looks like when that's running. Maybe it doesn't have a color. There it goes. So you have that, and then we can switch over to the other side of the laptop. And here you can't control the color of the back fans, but you can change the color of the logo here So I just lit that up green, and if we turn the laptop around now, you can see we've got a little green color in the Legion logo there. So you have a lot of options for making the laptop your own from the standpoint of lighting. You can set up multiple profiles, so if you're in different places, you can have different colors assigned, but you will, again, be spending some time on this trying to get everything tweaked just right. And there's also some keyboard macros you can configure. So if you click on this little key here at the top, that will pull up the Magic Y key interface here, and what you can do is configure any one of these keys to do macro commands. My recommendation would be to make use of the M1 and M2 keys here because these are unassigned at the moment. But you could, for example, have your W key do something funky if you wanted it to. So for example, I can have it do a key operation, so I could turn the W into a space bar if I wanted to, which might be a little dangerous if your younger siblings get into the computer and start messing with it. But you can also do mouse functions and go to specific websites. You can even adjust volume controls, for example. So there's a lot that you can work into the mix here with these macro keys. And if you've got a game where you want to maybe change weapons and then execute a mouse click immediately, for example, you could map that as a macro to M1 or M2 here and have very quick access to things that you're often having to do redundantly while you're playing your games or doing some other things, maybe in a video editing application, for example. There's also profiles on this application too, so you can click on 2 here. That'll give you a completely different configuration versus profile 1, and they have some ability to export and import profile settings too. So you do have some flexibility here given the macro row. Again, I don't recommend changing the purpose of any of these other keys here, but you can if you want to. Just be careful, you might make your computer a little difficult to use as a result if you start getting a little too crazy with that. So overall, I am very happy with the industrial design of this computer. It's very well built. I like how compact it is, and if you are using this in the workplace, if you turn the lights off, it doesn't look all that obnoxious. It doesn't scream out gaming until you turn the lighting on and have all this pulsating color going on. So I think it could work well for video editors and others who have high demand activities. They want a computer that has a very functional cooling system. You've got all that, and when the lights are off here, it really, I think, can work quite well in the professional world too. But I do have some cautions here. One is the webcam, as you saw. When you're typing on your laptop and on the phone with somebody, they're going to see these spiders walking towards them, which are your fingers. That was not an exaggerated thing you saw in that webcam sample I took with it. It really does show your hands typing on the keyboard quite well there, so just be advised of that. More importantly, though, I'm concerned about some of the banding I'm seeing on the display. So when you've got a dark color like this on screen, I'm seeing these very small vertical lines on here, which I don't typically see on laptop displays. It might be that I just have a bad display, so your mileage may vary, but I think if you are shopping for this and you happen to see one at your local retailer, pull up something dark like this and make sure you're not seeing that as well, because that's definitely something that's been consistently happening on this review loaner that I have in here. One other thing to note is the GPU that is in this laptop. This GPU now is about 2 years old. We know now there are new NVIDIA GPUs making their way onto the market as I speak. So at some point, this form factor is going to get a new version of the 1050 Ti, which will probably run a little faster in around the same form factor here. So bear that out. You're going to probably see better performance for the same price in the not so distant future. So if you have a 1050 Ti now, this doesn't get you anything more. But if you are running with something older, then this is probably not a bad place to go. Just know that something better is on the horizon, as it usually is, but much closer now than it might have been a year ago. So that's going to do it for our review of the Y730 15-inch. I think there's a 17-inch on the way as well. And until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Gerard Newberg, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.